think we have got lots of people on the call, which is great. And good that we've got Brian with us today as well. Welcome, Brian. Apologies, we are starting 15 minutes late. We finished the previous meeting a little late and felt we needed a little bit of a longer break to focus on this one. So welcome everyone. I think we'll make a start to the Integrated Care Board meeting for December. We have a few apologies today. We have apologies from Jeff Farrar, which is why I'm chairing it, Ellen Donovan, Will Warrender, Dave Perry, but I think we've got Anna Clark with us representing Dave, which is good. John Hayes, Stephen Peacock. I wasn't aware if Stephen was going to send anyone in his place. I don't know, Lauren or Lucy, whether you've been told that.
Alison,
No.
I don't believe.
No,
Sorry.
we haven't, Alison.
No, okay, so we'll just take Stephen's apologies and Aisha Farouk's apologies as well. So there's a good number of us here on the call, so which is really good. And just to remind everybody that this is a meeting in public. It isn't a public meeting. There is a good opportunity at the end of the meeting for those members of the public present to ask any questions. We haven't had any so far, but very open. Brian, particularly talking to you, if you have any questions or comments at the end of the meeting, be good to hear them. Are there any new declarations of interest that anybody's got for the agenda today? No. So we'll take those as they stand on the log. And if we can take the minutes of the meeting in November. My iPad has just decided to go to sleep. If we can take the minutes in their totality, that would be good. So we've got 17 pages. I don't intend to go through them page by page, but are there any matters of accuracy that anyone's got for those minutes? No. So thank you very much for a really good set of accurate minutes. We'll note those and close those. If we can go on to the action log. The first action is recommend closure. The second one is for now, which is Rosie. I don't know whether you want to update us. It's a joint action between Rosie and Sarah.
Yeah, so Sarah and I have met and discussed it. I've also got the team to do a kind of a risk matrix piece for the system quality group. We've still just got a bit of processing to do around it, Chair, around aligning the two risk registers. I think the way I will propose to, because the SQG risks and issues aren't all scored in the same way a corporate risk register is, but I think what I could do is include the briefing that goes off to the regional quality group into the closed board submission of the Quality Outcomes and Performance Committee, so board can see what's being raised regionally, has oversight of those sorts of risks and issues we're dealing with, and then we can carry on with the work about when does it become a scored corporate risk that goes onto the systems risk register rather than something the SQG is managing. So we're almost there, but not quite complete, Alison, but it's in process.
And that sounds really sensible, Rosie. So it'll come up through the quality and outcomes reporting as it does through the committee anyway. So that's great. So we're recommending closure of that action.
I'm happy for that because I've got a plan and it'll be enacted for next committee.
Great. Lovely. Thank you very much, Rosie. The next two on that page are recommend closure, so wasn't going to go into those. And there weren't any other matters arising unless anyone else had any. No. Okay. Right. Shane, over to you first for Chief Executive's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. So colleagues, as usual, three big things. So people have the paper, so I'm not going to read it verbatim quite clearly. Three big things this month are restructuring, what's happening with winter, and then the acute provider collaborative and where it's going to next. With regards to organisational structures, as people can see in the paper, we've been going through a process, as you know, in terms of reorganising, looking at the cost reduction process, etc. We have come to the point now where we will be launching a staff consultation on Monday, which will look at the new operating model and in particular then look at the new structures and roles and within our structures. It has taken a huge amount of work to get here. The amount of work that our people, teams have done and our own and everyone else in the organisation done is enormous. But we're trying to present now as an organisation that's considerably leaner. And also will still deliver to the core purpose as articulated in the paper. I've recopied the operating model, which clearly outlines our core purpose and what we're here to do as an ICB. So, as I say, that has consumed a huge amount of organisational time. We hope we are progressing well through it. As I say, consultation starts on Monday with a view to then closing consultation in the middle of January. It is a staff consultation and therefore it won't be open to the public. It's for our staff as with regards to their HR contract, with their contract with us, to look at actually what does it mean for them, and therefore it's a staff consultation, not a public consultation. The second big issue for us is winter, and winter will always be on the updates for the next couple of months. The paper reiterates actually a quick summary of where we have invested our money, actually now over £40 million for winter, even though we started planning well early in the year. And you can see where that is. And really what I tried to present is a summary of November. And you can read that at your leisure. But clearly what it shows is that there are some positives, there are some negatives, but I think what is very clear to state, and which isn't in November, but it is in early December, it has been a remarkably difficult first week in December. And what has happened, and that's not just BNSSG. I think it's important to stress that is across all of the country and even the Southwest. Myself and other chief executives were on a call this morning, and that was reiterated by the the regional director of the NHS for the Southwest. Demand across Southwest has gone up, and it has been a considerably difficult week. I know that Joanne Medhurst, CMO, has been on call all week. I know Maria and Eugene's teams have been working unbelievably hard, as have Joe and Dave and Stephen from the local authorities. It has been a very difficult week. So it's great we've invested. You can see how we've invested, and you can see quite clearly, we are still doing well generally around ambulance handover, ambulance Cat 2 performance. We're still doing well in terms of 4-hour performance, etc. But it has been a very, very, very hard week. And as we said before, that we would use expansion of beds in the community if we had to this winter, and we did have to this week to actually enhance our beds in our community and at a very short notice. And then the final bit in my update, Chair, is very much about looking forward with regards to the Acute Provider Collaborative. You will have seen in the media yesterday that there was an announcement from UHBW NBT to work much closer together on the back of a very, very strong clinical engagement around the clinical model for the two organisations. And really what it's looking towards is creating a group style model for the hospitals, for the two trusts in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester, because obviously includes Western, and very strong collaborative moving forward. And you'll see for the press release yesterday, we're talking about a joint chair being appointed to the new collaborative very early next year, probably March, April time, and then obviously following on from that, then a group chief executive being appointed. This is a piece of work which is about bringing services closer together, driving out variation, really driving out duplication, but more importantly, establishing a really strong organisation to drive forward the objectives of the system about improving outcomes in terms of reducing inequalities, etc. So it's a really important moment in the ICB and the ICS trajectory, and it's something that we as a system will support very strongly as it moves forward. So, Chair, there are the three big things for me. Happy to take thoughts, comments or questions.
Shane, thanks very much. As always, a really helpful summary of what's important. And these, as you say, are really key things, all of them. Open it up, colleagues, to comments or questions for Shane. Shane, could I just ask a quick one on the on the escalation of pressures, I mean, clearly it's ramped up quite considerably. Is there anything in the winter planning that it has been so meticulous that has been tested, or you're changing as a result of this escalation, or is the plan helping?
I'm going to ask Joe to come in as the winter director, because I think it's how it's being controlled during this week, and there is control, still pressure, but there is control. But Joe, do you want to just explain how that's worked this week?
Yeah, so as we know, sort of activity does vary, doesn't it, across a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis, and for whatever reason, the demand at the front door across our system seemed to peak across Monday, Tuesday. We always know this happens in December. It's a combination of cold weather, respiratory diseases, flooding, ice, etc. So it just drives increased emergency activity. And I think Monday, Tuesday were really tough. But I think what I was really struck by is the winter plan kicked in. We had 4 calls across Tuesday with all the coups, all of the leads across the councils, real willingness to work together, and a real clear understanding of what our options were, and a real sort of clear professional debate about where we could liberate restraints, which ended up in additional 10 beds in one of the nursing homes in Bristol, linked to the fact that Bristol actually was really confident they could actually get these people assessed and out, underpinned by a quality impact assessment, Maria, that I'm going to do with Denise Morehouse, the chief nurse, which was a concern about you. So we're going to assess specific quality impact assessment that I will do, and that will become a framework for when we make these decisions about spot purchasing, we always quality impact assess that decision. So we just did enact the plan. I think everyone worked very well collaboratively together and understood the plan. So yes, I think it did work, and we did get feedback from the medical director of SWAST saying that they felt that the response to the BNSSG system was quick, swift, and had impact, which was not the same across the rest of the region. So I want to say thank you to all of your colleagues who are involved in that, and that commitment to move things quickly. Dominic, it was across, placements of mental health beds of people in casualty. It was nursing home placements out the back door. Everyone took accountability and part of it, and we went back into Opal 3 yesterday. So we'd managed to course correct. So I think that showed evidence that our winter plan is working, but it's a flexible, adaptable thing. It's live, it's dynamic. That would be my answer, Shane.
Thanks, Joe. That's really reassuring, and well done for you on leading it with your colleagues. I know Rosie's been leading on it, and others across the system. So that's a really good update. Thank you. Steve, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I guess I'm just peeking over the horizon really into early next year. So we've got junior doctors announced further industrial action. Our plans are tight anyway, and financially very tight. I just wonder whether or not the work is ongoing into the impact of industrial action on our ability to not only break even, but also deliver the continuing care against increasing demands.
Thank you, Steve. We're working our way through that. I think there is no doubt that the impact of junior doctor industrial action on elective care will be considerable, and urgent and emergency care will be considerable. So we're trying to quantify and work that out. As you are aware, we were asked to reprofile towards the end of the year, as in to bring it all the way to April, in terms of what we would be able to deliver with the resources that we had. We met with NHSE last Thursday and presented that picture. And then, unfortunately, the announcement of industrial action came after that meeting, and we have no doubt it will have an impact on elective and on scheduled or urgent emergency, and we're working our way through that. I think, and I appreciate it's a public meeting, I'm saddened by the potential impact this will have. I totally support anyone's right to industrial action and strike. This isn't a political comment in any way, but I'm saddened and concerned about the quality and safety challenge that this will bring to our population at the end of December and into January. We all know, having worked in health service for a mighty long time, the run up to the Christmas weekend or Christmas holidays is so important in terms of clearing hospitals, getting people back home and giving us a chance of making it into a very, very busy January. First week in January is always busy, and therefore, Steve, there is no doubt this will have an impact on elective and also on urgent emergency and the safety of our population. And we have to work through to quantify that, and we have to put in as many mitigating actions that we can, but it will have an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shane. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? I think with the announcement of UHBW and NBT, this is a moment in time, and there are a lot of people who've been in the system a long time, and getting to this point is no mean feat at all. And Jeff said in private session this morning, a lot of it's down to Maria and Eugene's leadership, and I just wanted to note that again this afternoon. This is a real moment in time. I don't know, Maria, I can't see Eugene on the call. I don't know, Maria, if you did want to make any additional comments, but it feels important enough to note the position that that we're in now. Okay, all right. So Shane, thank you very much. We are.
Sorry, Alison.
You're coming in. Oh, good.
Pardon me. I double muted myself there. Thank you very much for your support. I do think it's a really momentous time, actually, the opportunity to come together around delivering a joint clinical strategy which aims to note the services that are going to be required in the future across BNSSG for at least the next 5 years for our growing and changing population and their needs, our commitment to over time shift resources out into community primary care and left shift towards the preventative end, keeping people well. I do think actually for our system, which is probably one of the last systems to have embraced this challenge in quite the way we maybe should have done before, I think it's now really important. We've got so many engaged clinicians who want to move forward, great momentum. So really hopeful for delivering this in the new year, and thanks for your support.
Brilliant. Well said, Maria. Thank you very much. Shane, we're noting your report. Very helpful as always. Thank you very much. Right, going on to items for assurance. Sarah, the next one, 6.1, lessons learned from ICB procurement activities. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. So really just wanted to bring this paper to the board, recognising that one of our key roles as an integrated care board is about securing services for our population that we serve. So what we've done is just a review of sort of recent procurements as we get ready for the implementation of the provider selection regime, and we need to think about our policies. So we've done a review of that, looking at sort of lessons learned from various procurements, and you'll see sort of set out there the various elements that we've considered. I think probably the place where I just want to take you is just in terms of the actions to be taken and to be taken. And I think probably training is a really important part of this. So really making sure that everybody across the system and both within the ICB, but also in our provider organisations and other partners where we're working with them, really understand the various legislation that we're working to, and that we've got a clear sort of checklist for people that are following those procurement activities. What we are trying to do is, in effect, through my directorate, provide more support to everybody that's undertaking procurements. So whether that, regardless of where that is within the organisation. We have been doing work on a procurement standard operating procedure, and that will be completed by April, reflecting the changed legislation, and also be updating the procurement policy. We're also implementing a new accreditation process for where there are new entrants to the market that want to be available as a through the choice sort of regime within BNSSG. We've got engagement ongoing, really, in terms of just making sure that where we are doing those, because often the services we are going out for procurement, they're complex sometimes, and so it is really important there are multiple partners engaged, and so keeping all of those people on board and understanding what we're trying to do, and therefore being really clear about the governance process and having a clarity of an SRO for each of those procurements. So those are the core actions that I just wanted to bring to the board's attention and really get your support from. So happy to take any other questions, but that was all I wanted to raise.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah from colleagues? Jane.
Thank you, Alison. It's not so much a question, but I think it's just to reiterate to the board our commitment as an executive team and also then across the system to get this right. We know that some of the procurements that came earlier in the year were not as successful as they could have otherwise been, and I think we've reflected a lot on that as a team. And therefore, it's a real commitment that those actions that we will be taking, and they're not just ICB actions, they are system actions as well. That if we want to be, a centre for procurement excellence in what we do, then we are absolutely committed to these. And Alison, I'm not too sure where it should come back in the committee structure, but I think it would be important that we can bring this back to a committee structure to demonstrate we have done the actions that are articulated in this document.
Thanks, Shane. I might bring Steve in afterwards around as being chair of Finance, Estates and Digital. But I know John wants to come in at this point. John.
Thanks, Alison. It was really just to say that I really welcome this. I think it's a really candid piece of self-reflection, and I think that's very much to be applauded. And I was particularly interested to see Principle 5 around promoting health for individuals in the community. And I suppose what I'm hoping is that whatever we are bidding for, that is something that we would expect bidders to articulate, even in general terms, even if it doesn't go to the heart of the specific piece of business that we're transacting. I think it's something that we should be. That this looks like a good vehicle to put this front and centre in all of the work that we do.
Yes, thank you very much, John. Observations, Steve, as chair of the Finance Estates Digital, did you want to say anything around that?
No, I mean, I think lots of lessons. It would be true to say that the first round of procurement, we've learned a lot. We're now getting into, I think, a much better place, a much stronger place in terms of ensuring ourselves that the processes are sound and the processes are very clearly set out. So I think this is a good reflection, and I think we've learned already and put in place to strengthen all of our procurement. And I think this is just adding to our knowledge base. So well done to the team for getting us this far, I think. Brilliant.
Thank you, Steve. Do you think that on Shane's last point of which committee might monitor that it's going well, do you think it would be, have you got a sense?
I think it probably does sit with finance, if I'm honest. That would be the obvious place. If everyone else is content, then that we should do. Yeah, that sounds very sensible. Thank you, Steve. Great. I can't see any other comments or questions. I think this is a really good piece of work, Sarah. I mean, it's a real sign of something that, yes, we did learn some lessons earlier on, but you've formalised it, you've structured it, and you've set a standard now. So I think this is really welcome. So I think in terms of the recommendations, we are noting the 5 main categories that the improvements will fall under, and I can't see any members of the board not supporting the above actions, and we've agreed that the Finance, Estate and Digital Committee will be the overseer of progress. So thank you very much for that. That's great. Right, item 6.2, Debs, over to you on update on care traffic control. And I think Ellen is disappointed about not being here today because she told us yesterday she got online and got into it and she was really excited about it. So, but over to you.
Thank you. I don't know if Keith, I know we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so Keith may well be joining us. But if I just go through the paper. Oh, you're there. Perfect. If I go through the paper, I'll take it as read. There's 3 things that we're asking for today. If you remember back in March, we came along to the board to talk about this as a thing that we were developing. Obviously now you can click the links and it is there. The key 3 things that we're talking about today is to make sure that colleagues are aware and that we continue to view this as a system priority, because I think the engagement that we've had around the system is really starting to yield some benefit, and right across local authorities and our health colleagues, picking up the areas where we haven't had data previously. So there's actually been very little change for the acute sector and very little change around SWAS. The majority of the changes in primary care, in community mental health, and our local authorities. So there's still more work to do. There is a 400k investment that's been allocated to us by NHS England for the support of our control centre, and there's some very high level views in the paper that you can see about how we're proposing to spend that funding. And then the other key item that I was going to hand over to Keith on was just keeping you abreast of some of the changes that are happening around the OPAL metrics, and that will be reflected obviously in the care traffic control dashboard. Keith, can I hand over to you, and then I'll pick up one more point at the end.
Yeah, so NHSE have refreshed the acute OPAL framework. It's a welcome refresh, because what it means is every hospital across the country will be using the same framework to measure their OPAL status. So we have in BNSSG been slightly more sensitive because of our patch. We've had to have an equivalent and standardised OPAL framework across Western, BRI and MBT. So we almost were ahead of the curve, but what we're able to do now is we'll land the new framework within the Care Traffic Coordination Centre, the System Control Centre, and we'll give some feedback. We've got some feedback loops with NHSE on how that works for us. So that framework deployed early December. We're ready for it. We're going to land it in the faculty dashboard, but we will keep our local triggers dual running with our NHSE framework until we've come to a position where we are assured that our escalation actions and our BNSSG response can be aligned with the NHSE framework. And just to note that the alignment of that framework across the acutes is also planned across mental health, community and other sectors coming into 2024. So we look forward to working and developing that with NHSE. The other point to note and detailed in the paper is the risk of harm work, which is led by some of our system clinicians. So we have got a task and finish group, which is looking about how our metrics that we currently use in our operational world are also aligned with our quality and risk of harm colleagues. So we have got a clinically led task and finish group progressing that, which we're excited about, and we'll hopefully bring you more updates as we go through.
Thanks very much, Keith. Deb, did you want to do your final point before we open it up to questions?
That would be really helpful. So one of the things just that I think is really important for board members to note is the fact that obviously this board signed off the shared data and planning platform, and the care traffic control product was an early beta test because we needed to have something for the system, but that will over time fold into that shared data and planning platform, and that's where we get the next stages of development and really start to capitalise on the way in which we're capturing data across the system so that we can make some of that easier. And then the final piece is just really starting to flag up. When we did a bit of a round the system conversations with chief execs, when we were just at the stage of requirements gathering for this, there were some of the things that I know that chief execs and lead colleagues such as DASs were really interested in, is where do we get that what if analysis so that we can start to understand how pieces of our system connect together. So we are just starting that work with Dave and his team, starting to look at things like discharge targets so that we can do some what if analysis and understand what our optimized approach is around discharge targets, and really starting to make sure that we can factor in things like seasonality and make sure that where we are understanding the impacts of acting early before we get surge and starting to smooth some of those lines, that we can actually start to see the impacts that care traffic control is actually starting to have on the way in which we work together and the way in which we make decisions. So those will be some of the things that are coming in the next phases. So that was my final piece.
Yeah,
thanks.
Deb, thank you very much. There's a lot in there, isn't there? Let's open it up for any observations, comments, questions for Debs or Keith. I had a question. A couple of questions actually. One is you can see where the ambition is going, and you can see the opportunities, can't you? Debs, what will scupper us? What do we need to be alert to that we can head off at the pass to stop us realising our ambitions?
I might ask Chris and Keith to come in a second, but just my quick thought is the thing that will avoid us delivering the benefits around this is if we just focus on it being a tool that sits in the periphery. It needs to be embedded into the way that we work, and we need to see it as a constant evolution, so that where operational, clinical and leadership teams are trying to make decisions, that where they haven't got the data that they need, or the dashboard isn't showing them what they need to make better decisions, that we keep that as a constant development loop, so that it does become that space that people go to be able to understand what's going on in the system and help us really understand how, in a connected way, we're making better decisions about where our resources are. So I think it's really about the embedding it as part of day-to-day working. But I don't know, Chris or Keith, whether you had other thoughts.
Shall I do mine, Chris?
Yeah.
And then I think one of the pieces is probably going to be our system data maturity, about where we are within our patch in order to provide some of that data. And then, you know, we've got a helpful piece of work under ADAS at the moment, which is looking at the whole system pathway. So not just about where we're looking at the acute impact, but actually the out of hospital impact. But that requires a bit of work with all 3 local authorities to make sure we're in a good place digitally, operationally, in order to provide some of that data. So I think we have got some exciting work, I think, planned over the next couple of months to get that ready. And Ruth, I could just see your hand have gone up as well. The One Care work is really exciting. We've pushed that forward, but some of the EMIS-X and some of the extractions from some of those systems, I think what we didn't anticipate that data flows were going to be easy, but actually some of those data flows that we think, oh, let's just enable that, sometimes takes half a day or an analyst to log in at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the evening just to make a few bits happen. So there is some maturity work we need to get, and data maturity across our partners to make it visual in the dashboard.
Thank you, Keith. Chris, I didn't realise you were there. Did you want to add anything before I open it up to the people who are asking questions?
For me, really, just the still continuing to if you like, engage in the IG work and making sure that we see data sharing as the default. I think we've been really lucky on the programme up to now. People have been really engaged. We do want to move into sort of patient level data in this, and I think it will need people to get behind that idea of, yeah, data sharing is the right thing to do as long as we have the right controls and things in place, because that can be something that really makes this hard unnecessarily.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's quite clear. Steve, over to you first, please.
Thanks. So I think really well done to the teams that have got this far, because this is a really important piece of work for us going forward. And it does need to be embedded. We have to get to a point where the evidence base and the data is driving our decisions and considerations in planning. So I guess we've all got to make sure that we continually engage with this and enhance it and improve it over time. And the reason I'm saying that is there's a similar piece of work that's been done within Avon and Somerset Police Force that have been on a similar trajectory. What can they deliver? What data can they deliver to their leadership teams? What data can they deliver to beat officers, to locations and localities that's specific to allow them to make local decisions based on evidence? And it did just remind me about looking beyond just what we're doing in the health systems to see what's going on in other comparative organisations, just to see if we can learn anything.
Yeah,
great piece of work so far. Well done.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. I see Deb's nodding there. Ruth, over to you next, please.
Thanks, and to echo, yes, it is a great piece of work, and thank you for engaging with GPs on this, because that's very much appreciated. I think it is complicated, and I guess But when we're talking about the early warning sign of it, the role of general practice in that could give us some really useful and helpful information. So it's whether we can get into a position where that's built in before next winter. And I know there are challenges to it, and it might require a little bit of investment of resources, but I think it could be really, really helpful in terms of giving us that whole picture flow. So say thank you, and just to encourage us, maybe if we can push even harder in this area, I think it could be valuable.
Thanks, Ruth. And I think we need to agree the roadmap of what is the priority, because there's so many different things we could do. But I think you're absolutely right. What we believe is actually going to make the biggest impact is the area that we need to focus on. Thanks.
Jay, I know your hand went down again. Are you content with it being down?
Yeah, it was mostly to do with the read across to other ICBs. Are we leading? Are we following? Are there other things that we can learn from? Steve's already covered it, and much better.
Okay, thank you. Shane.
Thank you, Alison. Yesterday, myself and Chris were actually at a national conference looking at how we use information to make decisions. And I think what suddenly struck me is what we have built is quite far ahead of what the vast majority of people have. But I don't know whether that's meaning that we're making better decisions yet. Okay, and I don't wish to be controversial, but I think what we've managed to do is create a product that has huge potential, but are we as a system making better decisions? And I think for me, I'm myself and Debs and the whole exec team will think about how we do this. This now requires a genuine business change approach to decision making, not a technology-led solution. And I'd love to work with partners and to think about how we make change in our system so that this becomes a tool for good decisions, not an IT tool. Okay, and I think we are really far ahead. I mean, it's unbelievable how far ahead we are from most organizations, most ICBs in the country. But the big gain is using this to make a difference, not to have it. And I think that's the bit I'd like us to get into next.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. That's so well said. We've talked about that lots of times before, haven't we? We've got the right apparatus, but we're not making the most of its ability. Chris, you've put your hand down. Were you going to say what Shane said?
Well, no, I was just going to come back to Stephen on the point about police data. So we have got a relatively slow but live piece of work where we're trying to look at high impact users across health and the police. That's really got caught up in lots of IG issues, but that is something we're still trying to pursue through NHS Digital and various ports. So we do recognise that it is cutting edge, it feels, and quite hard, but we do recognise and are still trying to engage in that kind of process.
Thank you, Chris. Debs, you've given us 3 recommendations to support. I guess the other thing would be helpful to know is if you have a specific ask from the board, because the term embedded and being engaged and being with it has come back recurringly, hasn't it? So we'll go through the 3 recommendations, and if there's anything else you want from the board, then do say. So the first one is you're seeking continued endorsement for the project as a system priority, supporting winter and smarter and more efficient system decision making. I'll go through all 3. Approval for the development of the Smart System Control Centre, and the sharing, and you want us to note that you're sharing the progress on the updated OPAL frameworks and our approach to risk of harm. So, Debs, is there anything more specific that you've got all our partner leaders on the call? Is there anything specifically you think we need to do to help to keep that momentum and embeddedness and engagement?
It's about making sure that it's on the agenda in each organisation as something that is a priority, so that the people that are currently working on it with the teams continue to work on it. And that's, when we've got lots of competing priorities, that's really difficult. But I know particularly for Kieran Flanagan, she was saying there's a lot of work they can do around the risk of harm, but she really needs to make sure that those clinicians and data experts can still stay engaged. So I think it is, by us endorsing the commitment, it's about us giving some focus and making sure that we've got people who can contribute, because we can't just do this from the system. It has to be, or from the ICB, sorry, it has to be a system, and it has to be all of us connecting together.
And we've agreed this as a board to date, haven't we? Any partners on the call feel that they can't give this the priority that Debs is asking for at this time? No. Okay, good. That's great.
Thank you. That's
Very
great.
well. Yeah, very welcome report. Thank you to Keith and Chris as well for joining us, and we await the next iteration.
Thanks. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Chris.
Dave, over to you for a 6.3 EPRR core standards assurance, please.
Thank you, Alison. Has Jeanette joined? Because I don't want to take any credit for this work. Here we go.
She has.
Jeanette, hi, welcome. So yes, I'm presenting this paper for the board's information, but I don't want to take any credit for this. I've picked up this portfolio at last notice, and I think this is such a great performance for our system that we should note thanks to all of our EPRR teams across the patch, and Jeanette in particular for the ICB's position. So Jeanette, thank you and well done. The board is asked to note the ICB compliance with our annual EPRR standards review for 22-23. It's our annual look at this. In particular, just want to note to the board the improvement in compliance to full status for the ICB as an organisation, and also the improved compliance of providers around the table, notably Sirona and UHBW. MBT was already at the full position, but so an improved position in terms of our assurance around our emergency planning, response and resilience across the patch. I don't need to say any more. And again, Alison, just in terms of thanks to Jeanette and the EPRR teams for that position. It's assuring for our system to know that we have that level of resilience in our emergency systems. Jeanette, I don't know if you feel you need to add any more.
No, thanks very much, Dave. Great. Well, it's a well-written and welcome paper, and it's fantastic to see in terms of assurance, I have to say. So let's open it up. Are there any questions or comments from colleagues on this report? Dominic.
Firstly, just to commend colleagues in AWP for achieving full compliance 3 years in a row, which is just an astounding achievement. And Shane, I might get you to drop the individuals a line just to say thank you and well done. But secondly, that's led us on to thinking two things that might be of interest to the system. The first is, can we help other organisations in any way around EPRR? Don't know, discuss, but if anyone does want any help, we feel very confident about our abilities in this area. But the second thing that's really interesting is we're starting to think about within our organisations how we use the disciplined approach that we've taken to EPRR to improve other aspects of our organisation, because it is a very process improvement driven approach, and there's a real sort of small centre of expertise there in terms of figuring out how escalation works, how we respond to adverse events, that sort of thing. And I just think there's a really rich seam there to mine of opportunities to take the work that all organisations do about EPRR and say, how could you use that approach elsewhere in your organisation? Because this is clearly something we're all very good at.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Dominic. Ruth.
Thank you. And I hesitated before putting my hand up, but I note that general practice isn't part of that and primary care isn't part of that. And I just wondered if there is a gap there in terms of work that we should be, not in terms of compliance, but the work that we could helpfully be doing in primary care, and whether we should be taking action on that or not, or whether there is something separate. Do I need to catch up with people outside this meeting, but just coming from a slight position of not really knowing.
Ruth, let's pick it up outside. We're able to do that. We do keep a record of individual practice business continuity plans. So we do have assurance of those. But in terms of this reporting process, Jeanette, I'm assuming that's not something that we report at an individual practice level for this process.
Primary care haven't been included to date. There is, however, an Excel spreadsheet for primary care that I would happily share with Ruth as a sort of prep, as it were, If we think a couple of years ago, Sevenside weren't actually part of the process. They've been part of the process for the last 4 years, I think it is now. So I do think general practice probably will come into play in due course, definitely.
Yeah, because there's a bit of a difference, isn't there, between business continuity and EPRR, and just taking us on that journey in advance of when we might need to do it could be helpful, couldn't it?
Yes, thank you, Ruth. John.
Thanks, Alison. Just very briefly, really good to see this. It was a pleasure to read, and just well done to everybody. Brilliant to see. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, well said. Dave, you've got some recommendations. I know this is a set approach that is channeled up nationally. I wonder, though, as a board for future, whether we should incorporate some lines in our board reporting on EPR, which do include the other partners. So, for example, Ruth talking about primary care, because there clearly is some work you're doing, and that would give us a rounded picture at a local level before, as Jeanette's saying, it will catch up potentially for primary care nationally. But it might be good for us to see some of the background of the work that's being done with primary care, which it sounds like it's being done. But are you happy with that?
Well, I'll certainly include that moving forward, Alison. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I think what we're doing in a very supportive and well done way is noting the increase in the compliance status within the ICB area, particularly picking out Serona, Care and Health, and UHBW. But I think Dominic's point around AWP having the Jules Reme of 3 years running is quite is important one as well, and to note that the PPG 111 and SWOST were assessed and met fully compliant. So a really welcome report, Dave. Thank you very much to you, Jeanette, and everyone across the system who's worked on this. Thank you. Right, I think we will move on to the next item. Sarah, it's over to you for ICB ICS Risk Registers. And I don't think it's about approving a policy, is it?
No, sorry, it actually should be my name on that. We keep doing that, Sarah. I do apologise.
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Actually, no, it's my fault. The agenda should say Shane. It does say me at the bottom of the header, but it should say on the agenda. So apologies. So, colleagues, what we were trying, I'm going to bring Rob in a minute just to sort of facilitate the conversation. But you will recall when we were back in the Vassal Centre, maybe 3 meetings ago, we had a conversation about risk and the fact that, you know, we need to look at system risk and we need to look at ICB risk, and both system risk, both strategically, but also operationally coming up through the system as well. And we've done a lot of engagement at various levels. And what we've tried to do in this paper today, Chair, is just to bring it back together to say, this is now the proposed starting point for the ICB operational risk register, the starting point for the ICS operational risk register, and the starting point for the ICS strategic risk registers. Okay, they all serve a different purpose. So the ICB operational risk is very much for me running the ICB as an organisation, and obviously as a board you have a responsibility there. The other two are about the system as a whole, and therefore we've brought together these three. What I want firstly also say, they don't represent very well in diligent. Okay, so in terms of appendix 1, 2, and 3, you've got to zoom it up pretty big. But what we're trying to do here is say these are now the risk registers that we will work from. We also took a lead. Actually, Dominic, you had very kindly suggested that BSW had done some good work in the system risk. So we also met with BSW and explored some of that and tried to bring some of that into our strategic risk register as well. Because actually what they had was quite good. And then, as always, you take something that's quite good and then you build something else on top of it. So it was actually very, very helpful. So, colleagues, they're the 3 main registers that we then baseline. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think John, as in John Cappock, I mean, you made it very clear at the last one, you know, from an audit perspective, we need these things baseline. We need them there. We need them in the organisation, and then we can be using them. So, Rob, I'm going to ask you if there's anything you want to add, whether you want to look at each one in particular or just get questions on each one. I'm not too sure. But Rob, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Shane. I think you're absolutely right. This is the baseline. Some small bits of detail, if I may. So this all comes from the discussion that we did have at the board in September. There were a series of recommendations that were made, some of which you know have been represented here, and some of which are still in development. The system risks that were identified and are shown at Appendix 3. There had been a workshop at the beginning of the year with executives. There had been a list of suggested risk areas, if I may, and those have been turned into risk, defined risks, if you like, and those are now scored initially and have been to the system executive group for comments, and once received, we can expect some refinements in those areas, maybe some additions too. The ICB operational risks, the ICS operational risks, are taken from the registers that exist within the ICB, and in the back end of November, working across the enablers and resources group that I lead with healthcare improvement group management representatives. We have introduced a template. It's the template you see in front of you for use to capture risks as the health and care improvement groups get going with their priorities. So we can expect the position on risk to change as that information flows through the process. Very late. One of the actions from the last board was to update the ICB's risk management framework. John, very late, but a version is being posted on Diligent. It may already be there, but for the audit committee tomorrow to look at, with a view that actually pulls together ICB and ICS risks in line with the discussions that we had at the last board meeting. So, I'd just like to put on record my apologies for how late it's been to get that there, and obviously that's a matter for debate at the audit committee. Shane, in terms of questions about specific risks, I think risk leads are identified, and directors are here if there are specific questions that members would want to pose.
Great, thanks, Rob. Anything else, Shane, from you, or opening it up?
Opening up now for thoughts, comments and questions, Chair.
I think this is a really important thing, and it's a developing story, isn't it? There's been a lot of work across here, so I'm really interested in everyone's comments on, or not everyone, but people's comments on this, because there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on it. So, John, over to you first. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Alison, and thanks, Shane and Rob, for the update. I think this has progressed really well. I'm really pleased with what we're seeing. I think my specific point was, I suppose it's around process in a way. We socialised the work that had been done with some of the audit chairs at system audit chairs at a get together in September. I think we managed to reach about half of them. It was well received, and they were very supportive, and it may be something that we can pick up tomorrow in audit committee, but we just need to ensure that we're keeping them in the loop, because I'm just mindful that there's a cohort there that can really help us to drive this and to ensure that it's getting the traction that it needs everywhere. But that may be a conversation for tomorrow. But yeah, but so far so good. I think this is looking really good, and I think very much from my perspective going the right way.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful to hear. Thank you. Any other questions for Shane or Rob? Just in terms, I don't know, Shane or Rob, either of you. I mean, the success of this will be about everyone working together, won't it? In terms of the ICS, and you talk about the network that's going to be created and shared responsibility for the identification, control and mitigations of ICS risks. I suppose a similar question: what will help us get there quicker, and what will hinder us from achieving that colleagues around this call can help with?
If I could, so we have what's called the system exec group a chair, which is where all chief executives come together. We come together at least monthly, sometimes twice monthly. For me, the system strategic risk register needs to now become a standard area of conversation in that group to see, are we making a difference and are we managing risk in our system? And now we have this as a very clear set of risks. Then it allows us, we can gravitate around the 8 risks every time we meet and see, actually, are we making a difference and are we managing the system in that way? And that's at the chief executive level. There is, of course, the need for a risk network, and Rob can certainly respond to that. But I think as chief executives, we've always got to ask the question, are we making a difference? And the risk register provides that structure to do so. But Rob, from a risk network perspective, which is not the same as chief executive.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's the building section. That's the bit that we've got to get right and get on with. Alison, what I wanted to say was the ICS Risk Registry process and the framework that I've just alluded to talks about making sure that we get risks that are described collectively. In other words, if there's someone writing a risk, it's got to be written with the other party in mind, or other party or parties in mind, because the ICB's view of a risk, of a system risk, might not necessarily be the system's view of the system risk. And I think there's a really important bit of stakeholder engagement required in that, and that framework does set that out. So I'm interested to see what comes back through the healthcare improvement groups, which is where you have that collective forum for that type of thing happening.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, Rob. Sarah, and then Dominic.
Thanks, Alison. I think there's also like an important role of some of the sort of enabling groups around the system. So, when we're looking at financial risks, obviously the directors of finance are reviewing that regularly, but likewise on some of the issues, like some of the stuff that we'll be doing around planning, when we're looking at things like some of our ability to deliver some of our long-term priorities, if we can't collectively address the determinants of poor health, it's really making sure that those then are embedded as part of those processes. So it's really making sure that we're embedding it into all of those enabling functions as well. Okay,
thank you. Embedding is a recurring theme this afternoon, isn't it? Which is important. Thanks, Sarah. Dominic.
In answer to your question, Alison, as a practitioner, I think there's firstly there's a practical point, but then there's a really interesting opportunity. So the kind of practical point is to do this well, we need to make sure that we protect a bit of time and a bit of resource to be able to do it and get the system working, because if it's not working, it won't flow and it won't support what we're trying to do. And that leads me on to the opportunity, and I'm going to use mental health as the example because it's the part of the system I understand the best. So I can tell you all the things I'm really worried about. What we don't have at the moment is a way of calibrating what I'm really worried about versus what maybe Eugene or Maria or Ruth or Sue might be really worried about. Which ones are more important as a system? And I think that's the opportunity for us to actually use a common methodology across to say, yes, we've got this body of risk, but actually these ones are the ones that are now sitting to the top. And again, to come back to the mental health example, I'm particularly exercised about not enough resource, not enough capital, not enough flow through my beds. These are all things that are the part and parcel of what I do on a daily basis. They're not prioritised by others in the system, and I don't lay that at anyone's door because their risks are different. But it does give us a way of calibrating across as an ICB to start saying, are we actually focusing on the right things? And what's the data telling us, how we're doing our risk scoring and so on. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity there.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Eugene.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm quite attracted to what Dominic is talking about, because I've often struggled to reconcile the fact that I'm here representing the specialist and tertiary services, albeit I'm Chief Executive of UHBW. And maybe that might be the lens through which, at a system level, we try and have a composite view of the showstoppers. Now, in your case, Dominic, you are both the lead for mental health and the person running a mental health organization. So I suppose it'll work that way, but we almost have the ability to rise above what we are personally responsible for, and then step into the collective responsibility for specialist services. What are the risks that this board and only this board can deal with? Because it gives a clean and clear separation between how we manage risk at an organizational level, which is very much about the organization, and how we start to look at the composite risk around the responsibilities we hold for this board. So I don't know what the answer looks like, but there is a real attraction to developing our thinking further to be able to do some of the things that you're talking about, Dominic.
Thanks, Eugene. Shane or Sarah, did you want to come in on Dominic or Eugene's points there?
Well, I think we're going to have a seminar in January about capital prioritisation, and I think that's going to be the exact issue that we're going to have, where we're looking at very different risks in different sectors and thinking about, you know, and because it is, I mean, we've been working on this for quite a period now, and it is really difficult. And it's not because anybody doesn't want to do it, it's because it is really difficult. And I think, but that is absolutely, Eugene, that bit about standing above and really getting to that overarching view of where the biggest risks are for our population is going to be sort of key to that.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Steve?
It's not easy, is it? Because we're trying to operate at a system level, and chief executives are all accountable to their boards to make sure their organisations are safe and sound and financially sustainable. So the maturity of where we are as an ICB and as a system will be the ability to balance across those two things in an environment where the money is tight. It's easy to do, actually, if the money is not the issue, but it is an issue. Therefore, we've got to take a fairly high level about where do we get the biggest impact of our influence on the widest communities, or communities that we know are currently underinvested in. So it goes back to the health inequalities piece. So I think I agree with you, Sarah. It's going to be a real challenge to work through. It's our live example that we can test ourselves against.
And coming soon, early January. So
coming very soon, yeah.
Great. Okay, I can't see any more hands up. So that was a good discussion on an emerging, developing piece of work. So thank you to everyone. Shane, I know you've led on this. It's taking a lot of people's time and thoughts on this as well. So we will try out our approach properly in January for capital prioritisation, and then see how that goes. Steve, did you want to say anything else? Your hand was still up. No. Okay. So Shane, you're just asking us to note the contents of the paper and discuss, and hopefully the discussion's been helpful in terms of next steps. Fantastic.
Thank you, Chair. It has been.
Great. Thank you very much. So and just noting for the agenda, I know Jo Walker had to leave us at 1 hour, which was 2 minutes ago. So thanks for her attendance to date for that part of the meeting. Right. We're on to the committee updates now. So I know Outcomes, Performance and Quality Committee hasn't met, and Ellen has sent apologies. But Jo and Rosie, did either of you want to say anything at this point?
I have nothing additional to add at the moment, other than we had a really good conversation in our recent system quality group around the work that UHBW have done on Every Minute Matters and what differences that's made in a really sustainable way on their flow. So that was good to hear about. Okay, Jo, did you have anything you wanted to bring in?
Dave and I met with Ellen earlier in the week just to sort of capture her thoughts. I think there is ongoing concern about some of the performance metrics. Again, we've mentioned the elective performance. It is improving. Looking at this month's metrics, it's improving, but of course now we've got the junior doctor strike, so there's ongoing just monitoring, conversation with providers around elective performance, especially the long waiters, which I'm sure all the chief executives are completely excited on. That we do have a little bit of a focus on some of the cancer areas. Dermatology has been an area of focus, but we've done some significant system work on that. That will be coming back to the next OPQ committee, and we can show some definite movement. The other area of concern, which I know Maria, we were at the SWAG board yesterday, Maria, was about gynae, wasn't it? I was with consultant gynecologists this morning. I know there's a lot of work going on. I know there's a lot of activity. We're not seeing it yet through in the measures. And so it does remain an area of concern, but I do feel reassured that I think actually it'll probably turn a corner, and there is room there's going to be improvement across the rest of the year. And then we just had a bit of a general chat about whether or not we need to do a deep dive across children's services across the system. I think there are pockets of children's services where we do have concerns across a number of the providers in the system. So I think that probably we thought it was something to mention. There's nothing tangible, there's nothing concrete, I would say, but it's something we're going to deep dive into probably over the next 1 to 2 months. And we did just touch on the H2 NHS regional response to the sort of the performance assessment against our H2 the half-year plan, which actually I thought we felt actually set out a very good sort of state of the nation as we are now, to give us a sort of baseline for improvement across over the next quarter of the year. So we touched on that. Dave, is there anything else there that we think Ellen wanted us to mention?
Maybe not Ellen, but I would just draw out from the performance report, and certainly we discussed these with Ellen. Joe, you've mentioned elective weights. We just well, providers do continue to make really good progress towards their respective trajectories, reducing long waits, which is great. That there are residual long waits in a very small number of specialties. What I've started to engage in this again in the last month or so. The level of detailed understanding from those working on this is quite phenomenal in terms of the patient level understanding in a very small number of specialties, and the plans to improve have been noted by NHS England. So I think it's just helpful for the board to be aware of that level of assurance. And my other area, we don't often speak about this. Shane spoke about the winter update, and Joe initially, but the other area where, again, commendment to teams within provider departments is, although we have had blips recently, our ability to maintain our ambulance handover times has been strong across the system, and the effort that teams are putting in departments to get the crews back out on the road is commendable. There have been blips, but generally we're able to turn those crews around in a way that other systems aren't at the moment. So I just wanted to note that area of performance as well, Alison.
Lovely, thank you. So we've got the performance report here as well. So if there are any comments or questions to anything that Joe or Dave has said, or anything else on the performance report, please come in now. Joe, just when you talk about the children's review, I know you'll want to have a scope of what's in and what's out, but I am conscious that we saw some stark stuff about visible tooth decay in 5-year-olds in our patch. We are the worst in the region. And we had asked at Primary Care Committee for a potential deep dive into children's dentistry. Now, there may or may not be capacity in the hub to do that, but can you just have a think about whether you could include children and dentistry, I suppose, in whatever you're looking at?
In my mind, yeah, in my mind, Alison, that was definitely in.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Great. Sue, over to you.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Alison. It's really helpful to see performance across the region. I guess just comparing the different data sets, one of the things that would be really good to look at how we continuously develop it from my perspective in community is that our performance data in the report is based on the month, but we're not able to see the prior period, and it's quite helpful from a comparative perspective to be able to do that. I don't know, Debs, with the work that you're doing with the team, whether or not we'll be able to get to that. I mean, I can find it out looking back, but it's helpful to be able to see it in real time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we can pick that up. So I don't think we've done it all yet, but I think we can definitely pick it up.
So we pick that up as an action then, so that we don't lose it. That'd be great. So some trend analysis, perhaps. Yeah. Thank you, Sue. Great. So we're noting the outcomes, the quality and performance report and update. So thank you very much. Jaya, over to you and Joe for all things people committee, please.
Thank you, Alison. So here's a verbal update from our most recent meeting, which was on the 29th of November. Of course, you know there's no minutes submitted because of the timing challenges in making use of the most up-to-date workforce dashboard data. So I'll go through some of the key highlights, and thanks to Joe for preparing everything. So we've had good progress against the plan. Staff in post is above plan. Turnover is on a continuing downward trajectory. Winter is always going to be a challenging time for all of us, so we'll continue to monitor sickness and absence and the knock-on effect of covering shifts with agency and bank staff. In terms of the workforce monitoring, the dashboard is shaping up really nicely. I'm starting to see some real potential in its use. I wanted to give thanks officially to Joe and the team for making all of that come together. In line with the resonance with the work being done with the care traffic control work, we'll get it to a point where we'll start to say, well, what decisions are we going to be making better because we'll be able to pull all this data together. In the meantime, the key highlights: substantive staff in post is above plan by 1,049 working time equivalents. We do need to look at how we tie in productivity metrics alongside these figures, because obviously every time we take on new staff, it takes staff to train up staff, and it would be nice to see if we can see how this comes out, particularly in the financials. On turnover, we're seeing a downward trend across the year. So November 22, we had 17.1%. The ICS average for October is now 13.8%. Temporary staffing continues to be an area of focus, with BNSSG and BSW working collaboratively to support AWP as system partners. Internationally, in terms of recruitment, we're on plan. Turnover is in the target range of 12 to 15.7% across our health partners. UHBW is at the lowest at 12.3%. Sickness, the system average for October was 5.2%, which is within the range that we have of 4.7 to 5.7%. So our workforce report has been expanded to now include social care data, but there's a caveat there. It's early stages, reporting varies, so this is a work in progress, but it's lovely to see it coming through. So we're beginning to get a real picture of the health and care workforce across the system. We also intend to broaden the reporting against these metrics regarding actions to continue to drive improved performance and also to mitigate risks. We'll be including a regional comparison too, which will give us some kind of context about what's happening across that region. Finally, at the last meeting, we all agreed as a board to invite the VCSE Alliance to attend our people committee in line with the planned attendance here at this board. We'll be writing to them in due course. So that's our quickie update.
Jay, thank you very much. Do you want to come in, Joe, with anything, and then we can open it up to questions, comments? Is there anything you want to add?
The only thing to add, as you would imagine, and it ties to work of other colleagues, is we are obviously in the planning rounds for 24-25. So workforce plans coming in from partners and being sort of aggregated into a plan for the ICS as a whole. It's through the lens of the HSIGs, which I think has been picked up and mentioned earlier. So that's coming together really nicely. That will be a submission that includes plan numbers and narrative. And it will start to bridge us towards the long-term workforce plan, for which we have to have worked out plans in place for 25-26. So just to say that's in the mapping and the planning, and as Jaya mentioned, we'll link to the various dashboards and the Power BI work that we are now doing. So there's a nice alignment of our ability to measure through those dashboards as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So a rounded people report. Anybody got any questions, comments, observations for Jaya or Joe? No. Okay, Joe, thank you very much. Over to Steve, you first for finance, estates and digital, and then Debs for the digital bit and Sarah for the finance bit. Thank you.
Great, thank you. In the packs, we've got updated standing financial instructions, which were considered at the last Fed board with recommendation to approve. So they're coming here for approval. Just to note that it It's the financial instructions and brings it in line with what we need to be able to do the business of the ICB, so delegated authority levels and the like. So we'll need to take that forward, sign that one off. Sarah, anything else you want to say on that one before I move us on?
Sorry, just in terms of the main changes, as having been in operation now for just over a year, we've particularly looked at the thresholds of what of delegated authority. So those are the particular changes that I wanted to draw to your attention. But we've also just checked it back in terms of other changes that there have been in legislation and that sort of thing.
So I don't think there's anything that we spotted that was controversial or worrying. No. The checks and balances are still very much there.
Okay.
So if people are content, we will take that. Then moving on, just to remind us that all of our committees are joined, in effect, are joined together. So FED has to be, I think, aware of the work that goes on both within quality areas as well as people, because those two things, along with finance, are critical to balance. And one of the things that at the moment we're slightly worrying about is, of course, our ability to deliver the savings that we need to deliver going forward. We're slightly off track in some organisations, and we're working with those organisations to understand why and how we can help and support and understand what they're doing in organisations to make sure that their boards and they are taking the actions that they need to take. So as a system overall, we are moving towards the break even that we need. If we don't hit the break even, it causes us all sorts of problems going into the next financial year. One of the challenges I think for us, of course, has been and in the pack you've got the reports in terms of the impact of the industrial action. We then get some information from the centre around how to mitigate some of that, and now we're going to bounce into another set of industrial action rounds, which is disappointing and will make life slightly harder for us all, I think, in terms of being able to, first of all, manage objectives, but then secondly, keeping the balance on the finances in the right place. And that I'm worried about because we seem to be bouncing into that sort of difficult space. So it's going to get harder, I think, financially for us, which means we're going to have to work harder to make sure that we do drive out where we can the savings we need and keep each other informed of what's going on. I just want to say it's really useful in terms of the deep dives that we've been doing, just to get a better understanding of what's going on inside organisations and then spot can help or need to do a bit more work. So that's helpful to us. And then I think the only other thing I wanted to say was that at some point, when we get into the next set of planning rounds, it would be really useful if we joined up some of the work that we're doing in FED, looking at digital and estates, as well as finance, so that as we're developing our plans, we know where we'll be investing that will have the biggest impact. And that goes back to the quality pressures and the delivery of services in localities. There's a bit that we've got to do to make sure we really understand the whole picture and then use the finances that we've got in an appropriate way. That probably is best done, I think, in some board seminars or workshops, so that we've got the time and space just to share a little bit.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Yes, as you were talking then, I was thinking benefits realisation.
Yeah.
As a consistent thread going through everything, and the importance of being able to articulate what those benefits are. Okay, thank you, Steve. Rob, did you want to come in? I was it on the point before around the standing financial instructions?
Thank you, Chair, and Steve. May I help you from a governance point of view? I've got my hat on. So the standing financial instructions are being signed off by the board, having in line with the scheme of reservation and delegation that was agreed. I think we revised it back in March or April. And as a result of that, the Fed committee has done the due diligence in regard to that. So Alison, I just wanted to be clear about that so that we can then launch those and get them included as part of our governance handbook and promulgated across the organisation.
Okay, well, we'll come to the
Thanks,
SFI
Doctor.
approval in due course. That's great. Thanks, Rob. Dominic.
I just wanted, if I may, to take the opportunity. I've provided updates to the ICB in 2 prior boards about AWP's financial position this year, and we attended Fed for a deep dive a week or so ago, which I still need to debrief with Sarah and Steve on. But I thought people might like to know what kind of, in a narrative sense, where we're at the moment. So if you recall, we said that we had to defer our in-year CIPs for about 6 months because of the 29A notice, and we stood those up after that point. And they're all now in train, and that means we've had to draw on non-recurrent funding sources for the first half of the year, which means that there's a risk to our financial plan. We are confident we will deliver our financial plan. The question is, what's the balance between recurrent and non-recurrent? We have made really good strides into recurrent savings. So as of last week, we had no out-of-area placements. Unfortunately, the weekend we had to make 1, but we're trying to bring that patient back. We've also reduced the baseline of our out-of-trust but in-area placements. So we're currently at 10 at various points. That's been up as high as 17 or 18. Each one of those that we save saves us £250,000 on an annualised basis and is the right thing for the patient. Yeah. So it's really, really important that we manage that, if you like, variable cost very well. On staffing, we're doing really, really well in clamping down on agencies. Tier 3 and off framework agencies are pretty much unheard of in AWP now. We just don't use them. And our volumes since the beginning of October, when we've really imposed tight grip on those, our volumes have come down materially. Those haven't translated into savings yet. And we've got a bit of a deep dive going on to try to understand why, because if the volume's gone down and the price is the same or lower than it was, why is it resulting in the answer that we need? And we think it's to do with premium shifts, so overnights and weekends and that sort of thing, but we're still exploring that. And our new safer staffing, which was agreed at our September board, implemented through October and November, is all incorporated into the rosters in December, so we expect to see a further improvement there. And we have this week agreed amongst our executive team what we think is a really, really good approach on medical locums that over the medium term should enable us to dramatically reduce our locum costs. Because again, one locum, £250,000 a year. And if you've got major workforce gaps in your medical workforce, that's a real challenge. And we think we've got quite a smart but simple approach to solving that over time. And then the final thing I said to Finance, Estates and Digital Committee is we also know what our phase 2 and our phase 3 is. And we had scoped those and planned those for next year. But if we have to bring those forward, then we would most certainly intend to do that. It does mean a slightly different risk profile. So if you like, we're moving from from a financial risk to a stakeholder and a quality risk, so we have to manage it in a slightly different way. So just to say, we're absolutely not sitting on our hands. We're also absolutely not saying everything's fine, nothing to see here. We're saying, yeah, this is hard work, but we're on it, we're doing it. We're clearly moving the dial, and we've got the evidence to demonstrate that. It's not yet biting in the finances in the way that we would expect, but with everything we're doing, it's got to, really. So I just thought it'd be helpful to give a bit of an update. Yeah, it is. And thank you for sharing, Dominic. I feel like we're getting iterative chapters of the financial journey that you're going on in AWP here, which is important, I think. Any other comments on Steve's update? Because I think if there aren't, if we can go to approval of the standing financial instructions, and then perhaps Sarah, if you wanted to take us through month 7. So, Dominic, your hand's up. Oh, that's fine. Sorry, it was the old hand. Sorry. Yeah, no, don't worry. Colleagues, are you happy to approve the standing financial instructions? If anyone is not in a position to approve them, please say now. Great, approved. Lovely, thank you. Sarah, do you want to take us through month 7? Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. And it is a bit of a complicated picture that we've tried to sort of set out in the cover paper, because obviously when we did the month 7 reporting, we were showing quite a considerable deficit, which was due in the main to the costs of industrial action. Obviously, since we did the month 7 position, there had then been further resource allocated to the system, and we've since done a replanning exercise, which we brought to the extraordinary board back in November. But now we've got a new industrial action coming, so we'll need to obviously work through that as well. So the replanning, basically, we have submitted a plan for the rest of this year that says we will deliver break even. Obviously, that was on the assumption that there aren't any further strikes. So we will obviously continue to try and do everything we can. Our focus needs to be on delivering our recurrent savings. That has to be the bit where we're really focusing, and also managing the other pressures that aren't to do with the industrial action, particularly the temporary staffing costs and the issues that we've had on funded care placements. So we're continuing that work. As we've highlighted in the cover sheet, there are 2 organisations that are further away in terms of year to date in savings delivery. Dominic's just updated on the AWP position, and for UHBW, we are implementing our sort of protocol in terms of starting the peer review work that we'll be reporting back by the middle of December. So we'll be able to update in January on that work. So really, the focus does need to continue to be both on the delivery of those savings in every organisation, but also making sure that we are also doing what we can to manage agency expenditure. We are considerably above the national picture. We can see on the graph that's in your pack on page 168 on diligent. We're significantly above both the plan that we set, but also the agency ceiling. So we'd already said we weren't going to be able to achieve the agency ceiling this year, but we're not anywhere close to achieving our own plan. So that is an area of focus nationally, and will continue to be an area of focus. And I know that there's lots of great work going on, and we are seeing some improvement. There are still some really difficult areas in that we're going to need to accelerate our progress on. So those were the couple of things that I particularly wanted to draw to the board's attention.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's open that up for questions and comments. Anybody? Sarah, in terms of timing, I mean, clearly we're getting to the end of this year, and we need to balance books and everything. Talking about cost improvement plans for 24-25 and the ability to concentrate on those and those that can start to come to fruition at the beginning of the financial year rather than backloading. What's your sense of where we are and what else might need to happen?
I think that's why, as a system, we've agreed to be very proactive in terms of the approach we're taking. We know that the replanning for this year basically meant we are able to achieve financial balance for 23-24 at a system and organisational level. But because we can see some of those issues, we're proactively sort of moving to do things like the peer review to really get on top of that planning for 24-25. We know that next year is going to be really tough, and therefore the more that we can do now to really get on top of it. But there is no doubt that the risk, never mind the risk to patient safety and the elective recovery, but also the distraction that industrial action is going to give in terms of our ability to plan for next year is significant. So that is a really material concern of the board, and that's why we've got to keep going with everything we can in terms of getting ahead on those issues.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. I don't see any other comments or questions, so we're noting month 7 report. Debs, anything in the digital space you would like to go through with us?
Just one very high level update for the board that we did as an update through Fed is that the Connecting Care shared care record procurement is progressing and is on track, which is due to come back to the board. So it's currently in evaluation and moderation. And just to say, for colleagues whose teams around the system have contributed to that both clinical, professional and leadership staff to make sure that it really is a co-produced, co-owned system has been really helpful. So thank you.
Great, thanks Debs. Any questions for Debs on the digital update? No? Okay, great. Let's move on to item 7.4, which is Primary Care Committee, which is me. We did have a meeting this month, last month, I should say. It's bi-monthly. We saw the first review of the primary care risks, which brought in the evolving risks narrative around pharmacy, optometry and dentistry, which was good to see. There was a general theme of assurance at committee about joining the dots up between pieces of work, which I thought was quite helpful, making those connections. We saw the decision-making processes in play at Primary Care Operational Group, which we then took assurance on. There's a lot of big, important decisions being made at Primary Care Operational Group on behalf of the board, and Primary Care Committee see the iterations of the decision-making process. We noted the financial position around primary care being 1.75 million overspent through prescribing drug prices, and we noted that at committee. The big thing I would note here is the known challenges around dentistry in our system and nationally. I think in my head they fit into three different groups. One is around the national contract for dentists, which was obviously out of our control, and it being fit for purpose. The second is that as a group of ICBs in the Southwest, we have come together as a commissioning hub, and a lot is expected of that commissioning hub for dentistry on our behalf, and just working through the capacity and capability of the hub to deliver what we may want it to. And the bit that we try to focus on is what local flexibility we've got. And Dave has always been very clear about where we have got local flexibility and ring fence funding. How can we be creative about innovation and improvement, because we've got a significant challenges there around dentistry. So I'm sure, and we've talked about dentistry before, and I'm sure we will again as board, but those were the key things I would pull out from the committee. Dave, did you have anything else you wanted to say at this point around any aspects of primary care for board?
No, I think you've covered it, Alison. I'll just note some good news for the board's information. I've been based in Weston today, so I got the privilege of going to the opening of a brand new general practice service for the Weston locality as soon as we finish. So a brand new GP surgery offering additional capacity to the residents of Weston. 168 Parklands Medical is the name of the practice, and for those that have been involved in CCG life before, people will know there's been a long standing development. So really good news for general practice in Weston, Alison.
Great, thank you, Dave. Good luck at the opening. Are you cutting the ribbon?
Thankfully, I think there's someone far more important than me to do that, Alison, but I'll be there holding it at one end.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for myself or Dave around primary care? Oh, okay, we're noting that. John, Audit and Risk Committee. Anything to add?
Thanks, Alison. No, because of the cycle that we're at, we've got a meeting tomorrow, and there's nothing to report since the last meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. Item 8. The Integrated Care Partnership Update, which Jeff normally provides. Shane, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So
thank you.
I attend the ICP as well. So a couple of interesting things just to share. First of all, we discussed the board-to-board workshop, whereby the ICP and the ICB will be coming together to explore how we work well together, so that we don't end up duplicating, etc. The second thing then was that there's been some engagement with the police to try to see where Avon and Somerset Stabbury would fit into our structures, and they have been invited to the ICP at Chief Constable level, and then the community policing to each of the 6 localities, and that was also discussed. It was noted that the VCSE Alliance are working now on the nomination for the ICB. So we've agreed, as we did at the last board meeting, that VCSE should have a chair around this table. And it was noted at the ICP that they are still exploring how that will happen. And then there were 3 presentations. One was Greg from our own organisation talking about winter planning, which was great. Sirona were there and talking in detail around D2A and where we are, which is also really, really helpful. And then a really detailed and engaged discussion on smoke-free BNSSG and actually where are we going with our desire as per our strategy to dramatically impact on smoking levels in BNSSG. And particularly looking at the issue of swapping, so cigarette smokers swapping for vapes, etc. And what was particularly interesting there is the voluntary community sector engaging on how could they be of the real assistance to that. So it was a very, very good presentation. And that was Matt Lenny was presenting that along with other people as well. So that was primarily the meeting, Chair. Happy to take any questions, but it was a good meeting, and as I say, particularly the smoke-free really, really ignited. Terrible use of words, but really got the conversation going because people were really interested. How do we make this systematic challenge real in our society?
Great, thank you very much, Shane. Any questions for Shane on the last ICP? Great, and that's a really important session early January, isn't it, in terms of coming together, or mid-January, isn't it, coming together, the ICP and the board. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Shane. I still don't think we've received any questions from members of the public, but Brian, I see that you're still here and you're very welcome. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask today?
Yes, I'm still here, but no questions today. I'm on a learning curve today to use 2 computers at the same time.
How have you managed?
Well, not too bad.
Good. Well, that's good then. That's a success.
Thank you very much for the meeting.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you. I don't think there's any other members of the public on. I've just been down the list and I just don't think there are. If there are, please speak now. No? Okay. Is there any other business around the table? No. Okay. So we have got a seminar on the 4th of January. And we've got the joint meeting on the 11th, and the next board is on the 1st of February, venues to be confirmed. So I think that's the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions and input. And if you celebrate Christmas, have a lovely Christmas. If not, just have a peaceful time if you can, and see you all next year. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Alison. See you tomorrow at Audit.